June 22nd, 1944. 3 o'clock a.m. The dense forests of eastern Belarus stir faintly under a starless sky, where the air hangs heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. In a fortified bunker near the front lines of Army Group Center, Field Marshal Ernst Busch sips bitter ersatz coffee, his eyes scanning reports by the flicker of a kerosene lamp. The defenses stretch like an iron spine across the Belarusian salient trenches, etched deep into the soil. Minefields sown like deadly seeds, and fortified towns declared festi plots by the Führer himself, unyielding bastions to be held to the last man. Busch leans back, confident. Intelligence whispers of Soviet buildups to the south. Toward Army Group North Ukraine, under that firebrand, Walter model, here. In the center, it's quiet. Too quiet, perhaps, but the Red Army has been bloodied before. They've learned their lesson at Kursk, haven't they? You can almost hear the distant rumble of trucks in the night. But it's dismissed as partisan mischief, those shadowy guerrillas who've been nipping at supply lines with their rail war sabotage. Explosives crackle sporadically on distant tracks, delaying trains laden with ammunition and fuel, but nothing more. German sentries huddle in their foxholes, rifles clutched against the chill, sharing cigarettes and tales of home. The line holds firm. The 3rd Panzer Army under General Georg Reinhardt to the north. The 4th Army, commanded by General Kurt von Tippelskirch in the middle, and the 9th Army, led by General Hans Jordan to the south. Behind them, reserves are sparse only, a handful of panzer divisions, their tigers and panthers, outnumbered by the ghosts of past victories. Hitler has decreed no retreats. The festi plots, like Vitebsk and Mogilev, will anchor the front, turning any assault into a meat grinder. But across the lines, unseen in the pre-dawn gloom, the Soviet machine awakens. Marshal Georgy Zhukov orchestrates from the shadows, his Maskarovka masterful deception fooling German reconnaissance. Dummy tanks inflate in the south. Radio traffic buzzes with feigned urgency, drawing eyes away from the real hammer blow. 4 fronts mass, the 1st Baltic under General Ivan Bagramian, the 3rd Belarusian under General Ivan Chernyakhovsky, the 2nd Belarusian under General Georgy Zakharov, and the 1st Belarusian under General Konstantin Rokossovsky. Over 1.6 million men, hardened by Stalingrad's forge, wait with bayonets fixed. Artillery, pieces 7,760 of them, line up, barrel to barrel. Shells stacked like cordwood. And in the armored echelons, the T-34s gleam under camouflage nets, sloped armor. Wide tracks for the mud, 85 millimeters. Guns hungry for panzer hulls. These are no mere tanks. They're the Red Army's thunderbolts, produced in factories beyond the Urals at a rate that defies German imagination. As the clock ticks toward 4 a.m., a low hum builds a symphony of engines idling, men whispering final prayers. Busch, in his bunker, reviews a map marked with arrows pointing south. The main thrust will come against Model, he mutters to his aides. Here, we'll hold. But what if the intelligence is wrong? What if the quiet is the prelude to apocalypse? The first shells whistle overhead, shattering the illusion. The barrage erupts, a wall of fire and steel that turns night into hellish day. Earth trembles as 143,000 tons of explosives rain down in the opening. Salvo, more than the Allies. Dropped on Hamburg in a week. Trenches collapse, bunkers implode. Men are buried alive in the churned soil. The Vitebsk sector cracks first. Soviet infantry from the 43rd and 39th Armies pour through the breaches, bayonets flashing in the dawn light. Behind them, the 5th Guards Tank Army under Marshal Pavel Rotmistrov revs up. T-34s surging forward at 30 kilometers per hour. Their Christie suspensions eating the rough terrain. German survivors stagger back. Radios crackling with panic. Ivan is breaking through. Panzers where are the panzers? Reinhardt's 3rd Panzer Army, with barely 100 tanks operational, scrambles to respond, but the Reds are everywhere flanking. Encircling, relentless. In Orcha, the 78th Assault Division under General Paul Valskars digs in. Their Sturmgeschütz, assault guns, barking defiance. But the Soviet 11th Guards Army hammers them with Katyusha rockets. The Stalin's organs screaming like banshees. Orcha falls by June 26th, the Dnieper crossings forced under withering fire. Southward, in Mughal, General Jordan's 9th Army faces the 2nd Belarusian Front's onslaught. The city, a Festiplatz, becomes a graveyard as Soviet sappers clear mines under cover of smoke. Infantry, advancing house to house. Bush demands counterattacks. But reserves are phantoms diverted to Normandy or the south. Hitler rages in the wolf's lair, refusing withdrawals. Hold, Vit. He bellows over the phone. But by June 24th, Vitebsk is encircled. General Friedrich Golowitz's corps, 28,000 men trapped in a cauldron. Pounded by IL to Sturmoviks from above. Attempts to break out fail. Bodies pile in the mud. Gallwitzer surrenders on June 28th. His men marching into captivity. The speed is staggering. In 6 days, Soviets advance 50 kilometers. Bridging rivers, outflanking T-34s lead the charge. Their diesel engines roaring as they bypass resistance. Deep into operational depths. German officers stare at maps, in disbelief. How can they move so fast? The doctrine of deep battle, perfected by Zhukov and Rokossovsky, unfolds, tactical breakthroughs, followed by mechanized exploitation. Cavalry mechanized groups like Pliev's, racing ahead on horseback and armor. Severing roads. But the worst is yet to come. As Bubraisk looms, the 1st Belarusian front launches on June 24th. Their barrage eclipsing the North's. The 65th and 3rd Armies smash into the 9th Army's flanks. Pliev's KMG, swinging wide to cut escapes at Slutske, Bubraisk, another fortress, crumbles by June 29th, 35,000 Germans trapped, the 9th Army eviscerated. Bush is sacked that day, his command in ruins. Enter Field Marshal Walter Model. The Führer's fireman, rushed from the south. He arrives amid chaos, his staff car dodging strafing runs. Surveying the shattered front, Model's face hardens. He stemmed tides before at Urzov, at Orel, but this. The reports flood in. Soviet tanks everywhere. T-34s slicing through like knives in butter. Unglitch, he whispers. Impossible, his army group, North Ukraine, was stripped bare to feed this inferno. Now, commanding the remnants, he must rebuild a line from ashes. Model orders frantic counterstrokes, pulling the 5th Panzer Division from reserves. But the Reds press on. By July 3rd, Minsk is in sight. The 2nd Guards Tank Corps, under General Alexei Berdeny, thunders in T-34s, clattering over rubble, liberating the city amid cheers from partisans. The pocket east of Minsk seals, 100,000 Germans encircled. Only stragglers escape through swamps. The advance doesn't stop. Vilnius, encircled by July 8th, street fights raging as the 5th Army and 5th Guards Tank Army converge. Model throws in the 6th Panzer, opening a fleeting corridor, but thousands perish. Brest falls by July 28th, the Vistula Bridge Berlin exposed. You feel the desperation now, the Reich's heart laid bare. Model, ever the defender, rallies what he can. But the T-34's speed has rewritten the map. From disbelief to doom, the summer of 44 bleeds red. July 4th, 1944. A dusty command post outside Minsk. Windows shot out. Maps bleeding red arrows across every wall. Field Marshal Walter Model steps over shattered glass. Coat unbuttoned. Eyes burning with the cold fury that earned him the nickname the Lion of Defense. His driver is still shaking from the low-level IL to attack that forced them off the road an hour earlier. Model doesn't notice. He is already ripping the phone from an aide's hand. Get me, Guderian, now. Colonel General Heinz Guderian, Inspector General of Armored Troops, comes on the crackling line from East Prussia. Model doesn't waste breath on greetings. Heinz, they're moving at 40 kilometers a day through forest and swamp. 40. My panzer divisions have fewer than 200 runners between them. Where are the new Panthers you promised? Silence. Then Guderian's clipped voice. The factories are being bombed nightly. We're lucky to get 20 machines a week. Model slams the receiver down so hard the handset cracks. He turns to his operations officer, Colonel Natsma. Show me the worst of it. Natsma spreads a fresh situation map. Red arrows curl around Minsk like the jaws of a wolf. East of the city, for German corps over 100,000 men are already inside a pocket. The Soviets are calmly shrinking. Model's finger traces the spearheads, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Guards Tank Corps. All T-34 85s, all moving faster than any German staff college ever thought possible. Model mutters the words no German general has dared speak since 1941. They have achieved operational surprise on the scale of our own Barbarossa. He looks up, voice suddenly low. And they're doing it with a tank we laughed at in 1941. You can picture the scene in his mind. Those early days when the first captured T-34s were paraded in Berlin. German officers poking the sloped armor, shaking their heads at the crude welds, the cast turret that looked like a bucket. Christie suspension copied from an American design. Diesel engine, no radios in most of them. They wrote reports calling it technically primitive. Hitler himself joked that if the Russians ever learned to fight as well as they built tanks, Germany would be in trouble. Now the joke is on them. Model demands a captured T-34B brought to headquarters that same night. A knocked-out wreck is dragged in on a prime mover, still reeking of scorched paint and blood. He walks around it slowly, boots crunching on broken glass. The wide tracks 550 millimeters, perfect for the Rasputitsa mud. The 85mm gun that can kill a tiger at 1,000 meters. The simple, brutal reliability. No delicate optics, no over-engineered transmission to seize up in the cold. He stops at the driver's hatch and stares inside. A dead Soviet lieutenant is still slumped over the controls, frozen fingers locked on the tillers. Model notices something else. The man is tiny, barely 5'4". The T-34 was built for small men, mass-produced for a nation that could throw millions into the furnace. Model turns away, face pale. Gentlemen, he says to his staff, we are not fighting the Red Army of 1941 anymore. We are fighting an avalanche. That night, he drafts one of the most desperate orders of the war. Every available battalion, every training company, every clerk who can fire a rifle is to form ad hoc Kampfgruppen and throw themselves across the roads to Baranovichi and Molodechno. The Hermann Gring panzer divisions, till refitting in Poland is, to entrain immediately. The Grossdeutschland, the same, even the 5th, SS Wiking, is pulled from the south. But the trains never come. Soviet partisans have turned the rail net into a shooting gallery. Bridges burn. Locomotives lie on their sides like gutted whales. And still the T-34s come. July 5th. Outside Molodechno, Hauptmann Hans von Luck, commander of the 125th. Panzer Grenadier Regiment watches through binoculars as a wave of olive-green tanks erupts from the tree line 3 kilometers away. 30, 50, 80 machines, moving in perfect echelons, dust plumes rising like cavalry of old. His own company has 4 Panzer IVs left. 4. He keys the radio, voice calm, only because terror has burned it out of him. All stations, this is luck. Engage, at will. And God help us. The T-34s don't even slow down. They fire on the move, something German doctrine said was impossible to do accurately. Shells slam into the village. Houses erupt in geysers of brick and timber. Von Luck's lead panzer for Bruges, up in the first minute. The others follow in quick succession. He survives only because the Russians simply drive past him, heading west. Always west. By nightfall, Model's headquarters is on the move again, fleeing another encirclement. The field marshal stands beside his Kubelwagen, staring at the burning horizon. A staff officer approaches with a fresh intercept. Soviet tanks reported 40 kilometers behind them, near Leida. Model's voice is almost a whisper. They have outrun their own infantry. They are operating 200 kilometers inside our lines with almost no supply tail. How? The answer is simple, and it terrifies him more than any battle he has ever fought. The T-34 doesn't need a supply tail the way a Panther does. It burns half the fuel, carries spare parts in the fighting compartment, and its crew can live on vodka and bread for days. It is the perfect weapon for a nation that has decided the only thing that matters is speed, to kill the German army before it can recover. Model climbs into the car. As it pulls away, he gives his last coherent order of the campaign. Burn the files. From now on, we fight without a rear. The avalanche is no longer coming. It is here. July 3rd, 1944. East of Minsk, inside a shrinking ring of fire, no larger than a county in Bavaria. 40 kilometers wide, 20 deep, and closing by the hour. 105,000 German soldiers, remnants of the 4th Army. The 9th Army, shreds of the 3rd Panzer Army, are trapped in what the Russians now casually call the Minsk Cauldron. No food convoys, no ammunition trains, no Luftwaffe. Just the summer sky, the endless pine forest, and the growl of T-34 engines circling like wolves. In the center of the pocket stands General Vincenz Müller, commander of the 12th Corps, once proud holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. Now he is unshaven, uniform torn, sitting on an ammunition crate, while his adjutant burns the last secret files in a rusted oil drum. The smoke drifts east, toward the advancing Soviets. Müller looks at the map one final time. There is no longer a front line, only a dotted red ring, drawn by some Soviet staff officer with a thick grease pencil. Inside that ring are 4 Corps headquarters, 28 divisions reduced to battalion strength, and thousands of wounded lying on the forest floor with no morphine left. A young lieutenant runs up, face black with soot. "General, the Russians are broadcasting again. They say any officer who surrenders with his men will be treated correctly. They are playing German music, Schläger. It's unbearable." Müller doesn't answer. He is remembering 1941, how his division rolled across these same in the opposite direction. How Russian prisoners begged for crusts of bread. How he once believed this land would belong to the Reich for 1,000 years. Now the music drifts through the trees. Calm, Zurich, Ichhab, Ditch Solib. A shell crashes nearby, then another. The final bombardment has begun. Out on the western edge of the pocket, Oberst Hans Trott leads the last coherent battle group, still trying to break out 1,200 men of the 78th Assault Division. 6 half-tracks, 1 King Tiger, that is already out of fuel. They move at dusk, creeping through marsh and birch forest, hoping to slip between the Soviet tank brigades. Trott whispers orders. No lights, no smoking, no talking. Every man carries only what he can walk. With rifle, 2 grenades, 1 day's rations. They almost make it. At 2:17 the night erupts. T-34s of the 2nd Guards tank corps switch on their searchlights, blinding white beams that pin the Germans like insects. Machine guns chatter. Tracers stitch the darkness. Men scream, fall, crawl into the underbrush. Trott is hit in the thigh, arterial blood pumping over the pine needles. He drags himself behind a fallen log and watches the T-34s roll past, so close he can smell the diesel. The turret hatches are open. Young Russian tankers stand half out of their holes, laughing, waving captured German watchers in the moonlight. One of them spots Trott. The T-34 stops. A submachine gun barks. Darkness. By dawn on July 8th, the pocket is the size of a parade ground. Survivors, maybe 15,000, are herded into a clearing near Mikhailovo. Soviet cameramen film it all for the newsreels. Endless columns of filthy, barefoot soldiers shuffling past the burning hulks of their own vehicles. Generals walk among them like private soldiers, Müller, Gollwitzer, Hofmeister, all stripped of sidearms and dignity. A Soviet political officer with perfect German climbs onto a T-34 turret and addresses the prisoners through a loudspeaker. "Comrades of the Wehrmacht, you have seen what the workers' and peasants' army can do when it fights for its own soil. Remember this day when you tell your children how fascism died in the forests of Belarus." No one cheers, no one boos. They are too exhausted even for hatred. Only one man still fights. Far to the west, near Grodno, Walter Model has scraped together a miracle. The fresh 12th Panzer Division, a company of new Jagdpanzer IVs, and the elite Grossdeutschland. On July 12, he launches Operation Sonnenwende, desperate counterstroke to cut the Soviet supply corridor and relieve pressure on the trapped armies. For 48 hours, it almost works. Grossdeutschland retakes 2 villages, destroys 30 T-34s, and Model himself drives forward in an open command half-track, pistol in hand, screaming at his men like a man possessed. Then the avalanche answers. The Soviet Third Guards tank Fresh machines. Full fuel tank slams into the German flank. Within 6 hours, the counterattack is shattered. Grossdeutschland loses half its tanks. Model is forced to pull back across the Niemen River, burning the bridges behind him. That night, he radios the Führer headquarters one last time. Army Group Center has ceased to exist as a fighting force. Enemy armored spearheads are 300 kilometers west of where they began 3 weeks ago. I have nothing left with which to stop them short of the There is a long pause on the line. Then Hitler's voice, strangely calm. Then you will stop them with your body. Click. Model lowers the handset. Outside his new headquarters, an abandoned Polish manor near Białystok Key can already hear the distant thunder of engines. The same sound that has haunted him for 3 weeks. T-34s. Always the T-34s. He lights a cigarette with shaking fingers and stares east, where the horizon glows with the fires of a dying army. The heart of the Reich is now undefended, and the summer is far from over. August 1st, 1944. A railway siding outside Trüberg, East Prussia. The air smells of pine disinfectant and fresh blood. A train has just pulled in from the east. 20 cattle cars, doors slid open, guarded by Red Army soldiers with PPSH submachine guns slung low. Inside, the survivors of Army Group Center. 10,000 men who once believed they were the masters of Europe now stumble onto the platform barefoot. Uniforms in rags, eyes hollowed by typhus and despair. A German medical orderly, himself a wounded veteran of the pocket, stares in disbelief. He recognizes the shoulder flashes. 78th Assault, 206th Infantry, 4th Panzer Division. Units that were legends, now reduced to ghosts. One of the prisoners, Oberstleutnant with half his face bandaged, catches the orderly's gaze and laughs. A cracked, terrible sound. Don't look so shocked, boy. You'll be marching east soon enough. The orderly steps back as if slapped. Because he knows the man is right. 400 kilometers to the east, the front has vanished. Where once there were 3 German armies, there is now only a ragged chain of improvised strongpoints held by boys from the Volksturm and old men from the Landwehr. Between them, Soviet reconnaissance battalions in captured German trucks roam at will. They drive up to villages, shout through loudspeakers for the Burgermeister to come out, and when he does, they hand him a bottle of schnapps and a new Soviet flag. Most comply, some disappear into the forest with a hunting rifle. Most don't come back. In Berlin, the scale of the catastrophe finally penetrates the marble corridors of the Reich Chancellery. Albert Speer is summoned to the map room at 2 a.m. Hitler stands alone under the harsh lights, coat unbuttoned, hair hanging in greasy strands. The Führer's finger traces the front line, what's left of it, from Connors to Brest-Litovsk. Then he taps the empty space where Army Group Center used to be. For weeks, he whispers. For weeks, and they took what took us 4 months in 1941. Speer says nothing. There is nothing to say. The entire industrial output of the occupied Soviet Union, the coal of the Donbass, the grain of Ukraine, the oil of the Caucasus is now irrevocably lost. The Wehrmacht has lost 28 divisions in a single operation. 28, more men than America landed on D-Day. Hitler turns, eyes suddenly sharp. And the worst part, Albert. The Russians didn't do it with wonder weapons. No jets, no atomic bombs, just that damned tank. The one we captured in 1941 and put in a museum because we thought it was a joke. Speer finally speaks. We should have copied it. Hitler's slap comes so fast, Speer doesn't see it. The sound cracks like a pistol shot. Never, the Führer hisses. We do not copy Slavic junk. But in factories from Essen to Linz, engineers are already doing exactly that. Secret orders have gone out. Simplify the Panther, widen the tracks, remove the interleaved wheels that freeze solid in Russian mud. Too late, far too late. Meanwhile, the T-34s keep rolling. August 15th, the East Prussian border. A column of Soviet tanks, Third Guards, Tank Army. Still the same machines that left the start line on June 22nd, crosses the old 1939 frontier into Germany proper. The lead T-34 85ths bears the hand-painted name Bagration in white Cyrillic across the turret. Its commander, Captain Yevgeny Besanov, stands in the cupola with a bottle of captured German cognac, laughing as the tank crushes a roadside sign that reads, Reichsgebiet, entry forbidden to Behind him, the crew sings Katusha at the top of their lungs. They are 600 kilometers from where they began 54 days ago. They have not had a single day of rest. Their tank still runs. The engine has never been changed. The gun has fired over 800 rounds and still hits what it aims at. In the villages they pass, old women come out with flowers. Children run alongside the tanks, shouting Hitler kaput. Soviet war correspondents film it all. One clip will be shown in Moscow cinemas for decades. A little German boy offering an apple to a grinning Russian tanker, who lifts him onto the turret and lets him steer for 100 meters. The propaganda writes itself. But the real story is quieter. That night, in a barn outside Insterburg, Captain Besanov sits on an ammunition box, cleaning his pistol. His crew sleeps around him, exhausted. He takes out a crumpled letter from home, his wife, writing from a village near Stalingrad. She tells him the roof is finally fixed. The cow is giving milk again. Their son has learned to read. Besanov reads it by the light of a burning German half-track outside the barn door. Then he looks at the tank parked in the yard. Scratched, scorched, one headlight shot away, but still ready for tomorrow. He pats the cold steel hull like an old friend. Almost there, girl, he whispers. Almost there. 600 kilometers behind him lie the graves of 350,000. German soldiers who never believed a primitive tank could do this. 600 kilometers ahead lies Berlin. And between the two, there is nothing left that can stop the avalanche. February 1945. A frozen rail yard outside Kustrin, 60 kilometers from Berlin. The same Captain Yevgeny Besanov, now a major with the Guards banner on his chest, stands beside his T-34 85ths one last time. The tank is a patchwork of weld scars, the muzzle brake wrapped in burlap against the cold. Someone has chalked to the Reichstag across the glacis plate in crooked white letters. Besanov lights a cigarette and watches Red Army engineers load the tank onto a flat car. It is being sent back to the motherland, not for scrap, but for a museum. The very first T-34 to cross the old German frontier is going home as a monument. A young lieutenant approaches, eyes wide. Comrade Major, they say your tank fought from the Volga to the Oder without an engine change. Is it true? Besanov exhales smoke into the biting air. True enough. She drank diesel, bled oil, and never once refused to start. That's all, a tanker asks. He flicks the cigarette away and climbs onto the deck one last time, running a gloved hand along the turret ring where a German shell once gouged a furrow deep enough to bury a finger. He remembers every kilometer, the burning forests east of Minsk. The night the crew slept inside the fighting compartment because the temperature dropped to -30. The morning they found a German general's staff car abandoned with the engine still warm and a half-eaten Black Forest cake on the back seat. He remembers the silence most of all. After the pockets closed and the prisoners were marched away, the land went quiet in a way no battlefield ever had before. No more artillery duels, no more Stuka sirens, no more confident German voices crackling over the radio. Just the low, steady growl of hundreds of T-34 engines moving west, and the wind blowing through empty helmets lying in the grass. Years later, long after the war, historians will argue about the greatest tank of the conflict: the Tiger's kill ratio, the Panther's sloping armor, the Sherman's reliability, but the old men who were there, Russian and German alike, will give the same answer when no one is recording. It wasn't about which tank was best on paper. It was about which one could be built by the tens of thousands, driven by boys who learned to fight on the ashes of their own villages, and kept coming, day after day, until the men who once laughed at it were either dead or marching the other way. In the end, Operation Bagration destroyed more than 28 German divisions. It killed the myth of the invincible Wehrmacht in a single summer stroke, and it did it with a tank that cost less to build than 4 Tiger engines, that ran on the worst fuel in the worst weather, crewed by men who had nothing left to lose. Walter Model never saw Berlin again. He shot himself in a forest near Duisburg on the 21st of April 1945. When the ring closed around Army Group B, his last words, according to his adjutant, were almost inaudible. The avalanche. The avalanche reached the Reichstag on the 2nd of May 1945. And when the red banner was raised above the ruined city, the first Soviet tank to park in the shadow of the Brandenburg Gate was a battered T-34 85ths. Its turret still bore the faded white lettering. The war moved on. The Cold War began. Tanks grew heavier, faster, deadlier. But in every Soviet and later Russian armored manual, one line has never changed. The decisive factor in deep battle is not the individual machine, but the mass, speed, and will to advance without pause. The Germans never forgot the lesson. They just never found an answer to it.